So in this episode, we're going to explore where does our ego come from, how it shapes our reality, and why it leads to so much unnecessary drama and really hinders our connections with other people. Now, I'll also explore with you some ways that you can kind of detach from the ego, a little bit of Buddhist philosophy here, so that you can feel a little bit more calm and you don't always feel like people are judging you or you're not good enough or any of the voices in our mind that keep us really stuck. We're going to go through all of that here. Ego is the big storyteller in our lives. It is all about limiting us with fear, judgment, and self-doubt. It's the stories we tell ourselves again and again. An example would be even recently for me, this is something that I'm continually working on. It's not an overnight thing, is I had a new acquaintance and I wanted to meet up and I had sent a little message and said, hey, let's get together. Are you free this time? I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. Now, I'm pretty good with people returning messages. I understand if it's a few days, but 2 weeks, I was thinking, wow, maybe she doesn't really like me. Maybe it's not going to be a case of we get together. All these thoughts that go through our minds. And I was finally able to silence them using a lot of the techniques and tools we'll talk about today. But then also a couple weeks later, she messaged me and said, I'm so sorry. I read your message. I thought I responded, but we are actually in the process of buying a new house and I just feel overwhelmed. Completely fair. But in my head, ego made me think that I am the issue, that I am the reason why she doesn't want to talk. And I completely isolated the fact that she has a life. And we do this again and again. To be honest, this is why it is so hard. I almost wish that we couldn't see when people are typing or when they've seen a message. I almost wish that we didn't know who was calling. Back to the days when, I don't know if any of you will remember this, but you had to find out from someone leaving a message on your home phone because otherwise it just invites us to create all of these stories. And that's what ego is. Ego is a collection of the stories we tell ourselves based on external validation, self-image, and conditioning. So a lot of the stuff that we grew up with. We limit ourselves. We create a lot of inner conflict and struggle and outer drama because of our ego. Big thing that I try to remind myself again and again, and this might help you too, to think about this, is that independent of how someone else acts, you are responsible for the energy you bring to an interaction. Whether you are right or wrong, you are responsible for the energy that you bring. This is a way to really think about when you get so caught up in how someone else should act or something someone did that makes you mad. How you bring your energy is really the only thing you can control, and it helps you to regulate these stories so you don't spiral. If we think about it, it's kind of like, why do we have this ego? If it creates so many problems for us, why does it even exist? Why do we have it? Mostly it's because it was a way for us to navigate a chaotic world. It gave us meaning. It protected us. Some of the things it told us allowed us to keep going, to stay safe, maybe also because of fear or past pain or assumptions, but it all comes together and it creates this ego. And if you're wondering what it looks like, it's kind of these kind of ego-driven stories. Here's some examples. See if they resonate for you. How could they do that to me? That's an example of entitlement a lot of times and perceived betrayal. Another example, why am I always like this? Why do I always fail? Why do I always lose a relationship? Why do I always get fired? Why am I always like this? That's often rooted in shame and fixed identity. Again, this is part of our ego. Final example, they think I'm not good enough. They think I can't do it, which is often low self-worth. Now, this could be true. They might think that about you. A lot of times, though, it's what you think. And the hardest part about this is that the stories you tell yourself will determine the reality you see and how you act. So for example, if you said, they think I'm not good enough, whether that's true or not, you will make it true because the way you perceive the world is the way that you will act. It becomes so much clearer why we need to stop, why we need to separate a little bit from our ego. Because these stories, these ego stories, they shrink us. They contract us. They reduce what is possible in the world for us. They limit our connection to other people, and they reinforce false beliefs that keep us in this trapped world that we don't feel good in. As an example of shifting realities, let's take those 3 statements I gave to you. They were ego-driven. Instead of saying, how could they do that to me? What if instead I said, maybe they're doing the best they can, or maybe they don't realize what they're doing? Do you see how you take away the emotional charge there? Why am I always like this? Could instead be, I'm learning and evolving. Why am I failing all the time? I'm learning and evolving. And then the last one was, they think I'm not good enough. I release what I can't control. Now, you might think about that last one and say, well, what does that have to do with how they think of me? If I let go of the need to control their perception, if I let go of the need to please them, for them to like me, then I can just thrive and focus on what I can do. And it doesn't matter what they think then. So we want to bring this into you now. Close your eyes if you need to. Think about a time where you felt triggered or hurt. What story did you tell yourself about what happened? You might not think about this as a story. You might think about this as the reality. So what reality are you saying happened? Was your reaction, or is your reaction, based on an assumption? Something you thought about the person, the situation, fear, or really often a past wound, something else that maybe someone did that was similar or that you're working through? Can you reframe that triggering situation to be more compassionate or at least neutral? An example would be this. If I say, I am so broken because this last relationship didn't work out. I'm so broken and I just feel like I can't make it work. I can't figure it out. If I can be more compassionate or neutral, I can shift that to, I've been through so many hard things. I am healing. I am learning. I am taking these learnings into the next situation, and every time I'm getting a little bit better. I'm not saying don't allow yourself a little bit of time to grieve, have the pity party, get upset, sure. Reining in how you react. My goal in this episode isn't necessarily for you to never have an emotion or a reaction, or to feel hurt or betrayed or extremely upset. It's just for you to be able to then reflect on that before you respond and make it worse, because that is often what we do. So this is your practice for this moment, this part of the episode. I want you to think about this. If you have a emotionally charged moment today or this week, which you probably will, instead of immediately responding or going down the spiral of how messed up the situation is, think about, what story am I telling myself right now? Is there a kinder or more true or more objective story that I could tell instead? Because when you are able to first become aware of the stories you're telling, but then also disconnect a little bit from them, create that pause, you get emotional freedom. And emotional freedom means that you are not imprisoned by your emotions. You feel them, but they don't control you. The next part here, we want to look at the psychology of ego. Where does it come from? We've already kind of talked about how ego is based on stories we constructed to protect ourselves. And again, to navigate this world, to identify who we are. Over time, 2 things happen. One is the stories become outdated. They limit growth. So we come up with a story when we had a limited perception. Our perception grows, but we stick with a story. The other thing that happens is we don't separate ourselves from ego. We become ego. So if I'm upset, it's not my ego that's damaged. It's me that feels so mad. And when you don't separate that way, it's very hard for you to come out of the spiral. It's so hard for us to separate because we have these stories that we're telling ourselves again and again, and they seem true through repetition. A big story I used to say was, when I was growing up, I was extremely shy and socially awkward. You know, that was something that I told myself and I made true. And it got to the point where I was pretty smart kid. I studied a lot. I knew the answers to most questions in class. Never math. But again, that could be a story. But I wouldn't ever answer them because I felt like if I raise my hand, then people are going to judge me. What if I say something wrong? What if my voice comes out wrong? I was so self-conscious, and the stories I created stopped me from participating. That was a story that limited me again and again because why? Back when I was a little kid, I was judged for speaking out. I stuck with this for many, many years. But it's not just to protect us. Modern psychology also talks about how we use our ego to create meaning. The stories we tell, they create meaning in this world so that we can interpret and act. And in many cases, they do help us. But in other cases, they don't. Things like, if I don't achieve, I won't be loved. That's a story I learned based on how I was conditioned and grew up. Now, this is not necessarily something that was ever said to me. Also, this is something that I felt. I am loved more, I'm given more attention when I achieve. And you can see the problem of this, if you ever have said this to yourself or believed it, is that when you don't achieve, you don't get love. The other thing is, I have to be perfect to be safe. Safe from judgment, safe from failure, safe from people not liking me. If I'm not perfect, I lose that safety. These might have guided you at one point, but they become your shackles later. So much of what we believe in ego to, the patterns we develop, it really is from childhood. It's from when we were young, adolescence. It's the praise we got. It's the criticism. It's the experiences. It's what other people said. And over again, the stories that this taught us become our meaning in the world, become our identity labels, become our rigid rules that we think we have to play. I'm the good girl, I'm the failure, I'm the fixer, I'm the overachiever. And we're unable to separate that identity from who we actually are so we don't evolve. It limits, again, our emotional freedom. It limits our connections. It limits our possibility. Here we bring it back to you. What's one story, and you might already be thinking about this, one story about yourself in childhood that still shapes your behavior today? And ask yourself, who would I be without that story? If you could rewrite everything, what would you say instead? If your childhood story was that you are always the fixer, you're the one that always supports other people and gives everything to everyone else, and you sacrifice yourself, who would you be if that wasn't your story? What would you do instead? Really think about this as an action step. Seriously consider challenging that story in one small way. And I don't mean all of this to sound like ego is so bad and stories about yourself are so bad, because they protected us, they helped us. It's just about making sure this doesn't go unchecked. Because when you can shift your story, you can shift your identity. You're allowed to grow beyond the role that you have given yourself. You're allowed to be more than the fixer, the good girl, the failure, the overachiever. If we go deeper into some of the problems the ego creates, you'll notice that it leads to a lot of distorted perception, some suffering, and emotional reactivity, meaning you respond immediately without thinking. And a story that happened to me a couple years ago, which I still feel it's still a bit emotionally raw, but I want to share it because I feel like many of us have experienced this, is someone in my family was never really there for me for many, many years, but they always wanted to once a year pretend that nothing had happened. Like I was still the little girl that they remembered. I called them out on this once and I said, I feel like if we're going to have a real relationship, we should talk more than once a year on my birthday or Christmas. That wasn't taken well. And they immediately shot back with all of these things about how my generation is ungrateful and how I'm entitled and all of the things, the struggles they did. Keep in mind, I didn't say anything about that. All I had said was I want a more genuine relationship with more than twice a year. And they took it personally and had this emotional reactivity. And this led to essentially severing that relationship. And it makes me really sad to think about, also considering because it was all ego. If they had let that go and been honest and said, hey, yeah, maybe we should talk about this, that could have been a different story. So you see how it limits connections. And I'm not just calling this person out because I know I've done it in the past to other people and I have lost friends that way. It not only tells us stories that aren't true, but it also is difficult because it hits old wounds. So if you have wounds like they're ignoring you, you're not good enough, you'll fail, and someone does something that touches on that wound, your ego is going to respond. And your ego, this is the biggest thing, your ego makes you the protagonist in every single story. It assumes other people's actions are solely based on you. When I said I had that acquaintance and I messaged her and she didn't respond, I made that about me when it had nothing to do with me. Most people are living their lives and they are centered in their bubble, and you don't really affect them. They might love you, they might connect with you, but a lot of the times they're going through their own crap and it has nothing to do with you. And I just feel like we forget that and we let our ego take over and invent these stories. And more than that, we fall into these really reactive narratives. So we spiral. And we spiral more because we have fear of judgment and we start comparing and we have shame, and all this stuff keeps going again and again and reinforcing that story in our minds, which keeps us unhappy. I think probably through all of this, you've already thought of some examples that are affecting you, but let's really take it in. Think of this. What is a recent moment where someone didn't respond to you, or they didn't respond the way you wanted? They canceled a plan. They said something that seemed harsh. What was the first story your mind created? The explanation for it. I want you to think of one other possible explanation. Something neutral or compassionate. For example, they didn't realize that this hurt me. They have a lot going on in their relationship. What could be happening there? And if you haven't done something, think about instead, has this happened to you recently? Has someone actually reacted to you in a really over the top manner? Can you think about maybe why they would have done that? It really helps you feel a little bit better in your life, doesn't it? To know that it's not all about you and about your ego. It's about so much more. There's so many people in this world and we're all living our own little stories. As an action for this, when something happens to you, someone responds a certain way, think about this statement. This is a story, not a fact. And you can also ask, is this story expanding or shrinking me? Or is it just neutral? It can be neutral too. Because from what you've seen so far, the ego, it loves to fill in the blanks there. When we don't have the answers, the ego gives it, and it writes it in fiction and fear. But you get to choose whether to believe that. You can rewrite it. Because often what you'll find, they have this saying that says, the fear you have is usually not as bad in reality. Like you'll have this fear of when you go on stage, but rarely as bad as it is in your mind. Same thing is, reality is often kinder many times than your ego's version. Because your ego is going to take everything that has gone wrong, everything that you're afraid of, and it is going to create this alternative reality that is so much worse. From here, you're probably wondering, okay, I've got some ideas on what I can do to manage my ego, to hold it in check, but how can I really make it a lifelong process, a lifelong journey to not always get stuck in my emotions? And this is where we go into a bit of the Buddhist perspective. And I will always remember I was 21, sitting in a sunny classroom in Washington, D.C., in a religious studies class, and we were talking about Buddhism. There's a lot of things I don't remember from it, but the one sentence that stuck out that I remember forever is this. Your attachment, your grasping for things is what causes suffering. And that includes always grasping for answers that our ego creates and stories that it creates. If we can let that go, the attachment to it, then we can start to feel more free. And again, that is pretty much, Buddhism is all about this, isn't it? It's all about letting go of your attachment to impermanent things like outcomes, status, roles, identities. Everything the ego tells you, things like, I am a successful person, I'm not successful, I'm the strong one, they should treat me this way. Even letting go attachment for how other people should act. Because when you have those stories, those attachments, when they feel threatened, when you are not the successful person you believe yourself to be, you're going to suffer. Not because of the reality that you're a failure, but because of the over significance that you have created for your story. So if you can let go of what others, how they act, let go of your own self-story, let go of releasing this need to prove, to defend, to uphold a specific identity, you will experience a lot more freedom in your life. So if you ask yourself, what is one identity, one outcome maybe, that you feel most attached to right now? It could be something like, I must be successful, I must make this amount of money, I must do this, I have to be the best mom. What is it for you? Who are you if that story changes? This is a scary thing. If you are not the successful person or the perfect mom, take a moment, breathe into the discomfort that comes with that. Loosen the grip on it. It's not saying to not try in business, in your relationships, with your kids. It's just letting go of the need to have the perfection. So the action here for you is either with this identity or something else. You're going to practice for one day. So look at your clock. This time tomorrow, one day, practice non-attachment, letting it go, saying, I am not this story, I am more. Again, we want to emphasize that releasing attachment, it doesn't mean giving up. It means being free. Loosening the story, loosen the threads and the stories you tell yourself, the identities you have, and see what peace comes in. Because when you cling to things, you won't have that same peace and freedom. Now, I will recommend that you listen to next, episode 301, I believe. It's called Finding Inner Calm, because that's kind of the next step here after we get over ego. I'll remind you at the end of this episode because we have just a few more parts to help you. Beyond the attachment, we really want to look at how can I release ego's grip? And this is all about awareness and the choice of the stories that you tell yourself. Will you become the narrator and not the victim of the story, not the puppet? There has been something that recently happened to me, and I'm not going to go into many details because I don't want this person to feel super called out. But I feel compelled to talk about it because I think if they had seen any of this stuff, they wouldn't feel this way. And they had a story in their mind about something that I did. I didn't even know that this person existed, okay? I had no idea. They created a story about me that was all centered on them. And it created a lot of anxiety for them and stress and caused them to lash out to me, which is unfortunate because it actually could have been a really nice collaboration. But this person got in their head a story about who they were and who I was, and it trapped them. This is where we need to look at 3 key things to shift away from those stories. 1 is mindfulness. Notice your thoughts without believing them. Look at, I think this person is not messaging me because they don't like me, but I don't need to believe it. I can just notice that thought. Next is reframing. So rewrite it in a more empowering way. I think this person is not responding to me because they have other crap to do. And I may or may not be a reason, but I'm not going to focus on that. 3, service. Focus on them and let your ego take a back seat. So this would be something like, I know they have a lot going on. The reframing. I'm going to see what happens. I've done my part. And you'll notice this, for example, when anything happens to you, thinking, is my ego speaking? Does this really define me? Is this so important if I really step back? Because what we've talked about so far in this whole episode is, yes, it's impossible really for most of us to eliminate ego, but you can stop giving it the pen every single time to write the horror fiction stories. You can start writing something more empowering because you are the narrator. You are the person that can write the story, and you can decide, am I going to let this be about fear, judgment, anxiety, or freedom? It's okay for you to have ego. We all do. It's not the enemy, but when we don't check it, if it goes without those checks and balances, it's going to create unnecessary pain and hurt and struggle and even trauma for you. Detaching from it lets you find that inner peace. Remember that episode 301, Finding the Inner Calm, can also be really helpful next. Let me know if any of this resonates with you, either in a review or an Instagram It's Your Day. I am always curious to see what is helping people here. Do you notice any of this? Does this make a difference for you? Is it helpful? And I want to thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are so much more than the stories you tell yourself. and I will see you in the next one.